Hi, Katie. How are you?
Hi, Commissioner. I'm good. How are you?
I am good.
Good. Happy to hear that. Did everyone have a nice fourth weekend?
It was good.
Good. Hi, Commissioner Porter Norton.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks everyone for being here nice and promptly. Just give it another minute or 30 seconds. See who else is able to join us. All right, well, thanks everyone for being here. Commissioner Porter Norton had reached out asking if there was going to be an opportunity at the CCI conference to talk about wildfire in kind of this more informal fashion. And unfortunately, we weren't able to accommodate it when we were in Vail at the end of May. But was happy to kind of put together this Zoom virtual opportunity, and I think we'll be able to do that at the winter conference in December. So we don't really have a much of kind of an official agenda. I think the question that we had discussed posing to all of you is really, what keeps you up at night about wildfire? What are I think lots of counties have had great success in mitigation, land use planning, in various formats to address wildfire, but what is still kind of the piggy on your back, if you will. So wanted to kind of pose that question to you. And I think the hope is that maybe if we can identify some common threads from this discussion, potentially have some follow-ups with experts to dig in a little bit deeper, and then potentially it could even turn into some solutions that perhaps Commissioner Delkemper can take to the Wildfire Commission, or we can recommend to legislators to partner with us on. So that's kind of the long roadmap. And I don't, Commissioner Porter Norton and Commissioner Dahlkemper, I spoke with both of you about this plan, so feel free to jump in if you'd like to add anything before we open it up.
No, Katie, I think you captured it really well. And I think that our hope was that we might even have a 2 or 3 stage process, which you may have mentioned just before I jumped on a few minutes late, and I apologize. But I think if we can really home in on some of that brainstorming and see if there are common themes, which I suspect there will be, and there might even be some outliers that we identify today and say, that's one we've got to pay more attention to and lift up.
Good. Great. So yeah, I guess we've got lots of time, so I will open up the floor and kind of help facilitate, but looking to all of you to come off of mute and share.
I'll break the ice. Amy Mitchell, Park County. What keeps me up at night is like over this weekend, we had red flag warnings, and it was high wildfire danger. And I did not see the Forest Service in all the areas of massive camping in Park County, that there was any communication about that. And people were enjoying their campfires during red flag warning when we had a stage 1 fire ban in the county on those red flag days. And so what keeps me up at night is the recreators in the forest doing whatever the heck they want, and really no good way to communicate with them. Thank you.
Amy, could I ask you a question on that? Does your sheriff had a stage 1 fire ban in effect? Does your sheriff coordinate with federal land management agencies to try and move both the county and the federal lands in a coordinated fashion in and out of fire bans?
Yes, we have an agreement, at least with South Park Ranger District, and I think it's also for South Platte Ranger District, that when we go into a stage 1 or stage 2 fire ban, or there's a red flag warning, the area of the ban includes the national forest. It's just that we only have a couple of those electronic signs, and to be able to move them and get them put up. I don't even see the Forest Service right now usually has, I think they have one sign up, wildland fire, put it dead out. But that sign's up all summer. And so I think people just look right past it. And it's that communication tool. I take it upon myself to educate everyone who is going down my county road, which is mostly all campers. But there needs to be some better way to let people know that that the risk is higher.
I'll echo Amy's comments, but maybe a slightly different twist. I mean, we're part of the upper Colorado River. Pretty much everything west of Summit County is. And there is a weekly call to coordinate restrictions. I mean, obviously, when Grand Junction goes into restrictions is going to be entirely different than when Summit County goes into restrictions. We're obviously much higher altitude, much different. So I think there is, and there's 2 national forests, maybe 3. There's a lot of complications to that system. But I think more to Amy's point, we often struggle with folks from the Front Range who come up to Summit County who don't understand just how dicey things can be. And by the way, some of our residents also don't do an amazing job. I mean, we had a small fire this weekend in Breckenridge. It was likely high school students that didn't put out a campfire. But more often than not, it is folks from the Front Range that don't put out a fire. So I would just say broad messaging in the public that this is a statewide issue. We all have to be diligent. That would be high on my priority list. The second thing I'll raise is property insurance. We've had all kinds of HOAs get kicked off. I had one last week tell me they went from 80,000 annual premium to 500,000 annual premium. They can't afford that. And I know the state is working. I know it's a conundrum, but I fear both for the number of folks in our community that are uninsured, as I do those folks that are underinsured now with the massive increase in property tax valuations. So I'd put that one high on my list.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Church.
Yes, just want to echo and expand on Amy's comment there. Public communication and the complexity. La Plata County has a great range in elevation, going over 12,000 and down to about 5,000. As a result, the Forest Service calls fire bans at different elevations, and that moves up the mountain as it gets drier. We as a county have our stage 1, stage 2. But we got 2 systems in play, and we need to figure out how to consolidate those systems if we possibly can.
Commissioner Hollingsworth.
Hi. So I'll echo, of course, the public lands, because I think even though it sounds like everyone does it coordinated between jurisdictions, and public land managers like the Forest Service. But even though we get the signs up, who's reading them? People just go by them. They're not really paying attention because, again, it's, as Amy said, it's not their community. So they are less interested in being safe. So beyond that, I think there are some other things that would be really great to explore. Some of these have come up before, but the railroad has no requirement to have water available. I saw on the news, there was a train and at that very end, it had a water tank, like a big cistern, and they just had it as part of the train. But, we have, a train that comes through and it's mostly freight, but we do have Amtrak on it as well. And we've worked with, or tried to work with the railroad. And they don't, like say, they're not really required to do that, and they think the county should do it. So, I don't necessarily agree with that, because they're bringing the trains through. And we don't have a stop. Hopefully someday we will. But I think railroads have caused fires up here. And so then our local firefighters come in, and a lot of them are volunteers, but just getting enough water to the location. So that could be a safety measure that could be implemented, probably would take legislation. I wish there was more funding for community water cisterns or a well tap that could be in the community. We have tried to do that with neighborhood groups, and it's always the cost. It's just the cost that is the barrier. Often we can find a location, but no money, and the homeowners and businesses don't necessarily feel like they have discretionary funds, even though everyone knows the greater good if there's a community cistern. Another thing that would be great is more homeowner mitigation grants for landowners. Up here, a lot of people really want to do the right thing, but they can't afford the local price. And so our local fire district started a mitigation program. So we've been funding them to do some work, mostly on county right-of-ways, and then gave them money to buy a truck and a chipper, but they can only do so much. And we do have a great mitigation group that's all volunteer run. So they'll go out and help low income, but they can only do so much. So more of those kind of community efforts, but the bottom line is always money. And then going back to the forest or public lands, we all know there's not much enforcement. Even if someone's out there doing the wrong thing, causing a fire, I think it's rare that the culprits are penalized for that, because usually they're long gone, and and no one saw anything, and they're just focused on the fire. So I don't know what the answer is besides money on these things, but maybe just more discussions about how to improve fire safety throughout the state, county by county, would be really great. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Porter Norton.
Yeah, lots of really good issues being raised here. We have a group here. I don't know if all of you have it. They are tied. They're a nonprofit, but they have cost share agreements with the Forest Service and I think the BLM. It's called the San Juan Mountains Association, and they have forest ambassadors out there that can be mobilized in the wilderness so that people are using good wilderness practices. And they often go to campgrounds, because I think, Sandy, you said that the Forest Service just does not, they barely have personnel to do law enforcement, let alone campfires. But if there's any nonprofits that can do that kind of stuff, and what we do, not we, it's our sheriff, but the commissioners don't get involved until stage 3, is that the sheriff and the Southern Ute Indian tribe, as they may see fit, and the forest and BLM and other fire entities, we coordinate. So they have meetings and say who's going to go first on stage 1, stage 2, and then try to get coordinated messages out through our PIOs. So that, again, without the enforcement on the federal lands, Amy, I think I totally get your frustration, but we at least try to say, and Clyde is right, we have very varying stages, which confuses people even more, because they might be camping near Durango and we're in stage 1, and we're not in stage 1 in other areas. So I think it's hit and miss. In terms of the railroad, Sandy, happy to talk offline with you. The train that is the tourist train in Durango started a fire. It was the 416 fire in 2018, burned 57,000 acres. It was horrible. Massive amount of damage. Thank goodness no lives lost, and burned 2/3 of a watershed down, the Hermosa Creek watershed that's a tributary to the Animas. So if you want to talk offline, they actually were held responsible after a lot of court proceedings, and they were held responsible, thank goodness. And we still, and now they went into diesel engines versus coal engines. They had the money to do that, and so that's good. But yeah, lots of stuff on the railroad. I'm curious, and it looks like Jody might be in a meeting. What are legislation that we need to see, or we need to be tracking on in this session? You know, I know the WUI code will come up in 25, but you know, where are we at with any legislation? I'm curious what people are hearing or through their various networks.
Commissioner
And
Dahlkemper, do you want to take
oh,
a
I'm-
stab at that? Or share anything first?
Sure, you bet. Marcia, was there more you were gonna say?
well, I just know that on these calls and for those of us in CCAT, we've identified obviously more money for programs like co-swap, the code issues, which I know are controversial, but we're moving forward with it. The state's moving forward. And then workforce issues and helping homeowners get the tools. And I just wondered where we're at with any of that being up this session.
Thanks. What I can share, I don't know if I can give specifics on what bills may be taking shape for 2025. And others may have thoughts on that. What I can share, though, is that the Jeffco Wildfire Commission invited Senator Cutter to come and use the commission as a sounding board in terms of priorities that they have for legislators looking ahead. And you'll be happy to know that many of the issues we raise align with some of the issues we've heard already. Mitigation was a big issue. Homeowners insurance is huge. The idea of grants, especially critical, tied to the work of the WUI Code Board. And some of those earlier concerns we had about affordability and what does that look like in the context of any new codes or regulations that the Wildfire Resiliency Board may put forward. So those were among some of the issues that we had shared with Senator Cutter. I know the Colorado Fire Commission recently presented just last Tuesday, but it was a Tuesday when we were in our hearing. So I was not able to be a part of that. In addition to those ideas that I just shared, they also talked, CFC members also talked at length about some of the work we're doing around prescribed burns and how do we build the political and public will to look at that as one of the many tools we can use to help reduce wildfire risk. That's sort of a quick look at sort of addressing to some degree the issues, the question that you raised, Marcia. If I can just mention really quickly in response to Katie's question about issues we're hearing, in Jeffco, homeowners insurance is and evacuation are our top two issues. There's a real fear with wildfire danger. Am I going to be able to get out? And how quickly can I do that? And how will I know? So our fire districts, the county and others have been really doing a lot of work, including forums where we get more than 100 people to hear more about, you know, what steps should I take? There's an interesting piece in this. And Marcia, this may be something we talked about. I can't recall, I apologize, but may have come up in our Jeffco Wildfire Commission on the homeowners insurance. There was a really interesting angle that was raised, and the insurance commissioner had talked about the example of having two homes right next to each other. Both have done mitigation, defensible space and more. One gets insurance, one doesn't. And so it calls into question the rating companies and the modeling that they use to make those determinations. And could there be a way potentially to get at that policy wise? I don't know. But it was an interesting piece, and it might have been Jim. I don't see Jim on the call who raised that. And then just finally on mitigation, in addition to the mitigation grants, I would also add just that biomass removal. How do we continue to incentivize companies? I just got an email from a constituent today who said, Open Space is doing all this mitigation at Three Sisters, which they weren't happy about, by the way, because it looked very different than the forest they're used to. And when are they going to remove all that biomass? It's been there a month or so. So that's another piece, a couple of other pieces I'd add. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add to that just a little bit. Coming out here in several months will be a new forest tracker dashboard from Colorado State University. And that will raise a lot of issues because of the database and where it's coming from. Shows in great detail plots that have been mitigated already and the agency that did it and the year they did it. So this is a great opportunity to raise questions. Unfortunately, I wish it was out today, but it's not quite ready for prime time. So that is that's yet to be determined. The other thing is, I'd like to raise the issue of ongoing mitigation maintenance. And there are a lot of plots that have been, thinned 10, 20 years ago that now are way overgrown, and we need funding to go back into that. So I would hope to see a slow shift in funding from the main mitigation over the next 5, 10 years over to more maintenance. And I know our HOA has about 30 acres or 40 acres that needs to be started. We need to start over again. Gambrel oak is so invasive and hard to control and hard to get rid of. So just 2 issues there. Thank you.
I think it's my turn next. I'll just add, I would like to reinforce the public information and public education piece. I think because people do move about, there's such different rules in different areas that it can be confusing for people. So just that education and re-education and the way we get the word out. And there's a lot of coverage of wildfire risk, but not a clear message about what people do about it. And I do think in that public info, I would also add, people move in from other places, people move about, and there is, at least in my area, somewhat of a lack of understanding of how to evacuate and like what is your personal responsibility. For example, in the Marshall Fire, the cell phone towers went out, and so the alerts that go to people's phones didn't go to everyone's phones because the cell phone towers burned down. So I literally had someone say to me, I didn't know if I should evacuate or not, and my house was on fire. It's like, if your house is on fire, you should evacuate. And so I do just education about, you do not need to wait for an evacuation notice. If you feel unsafe, you should leave. And during the Excel planned outage, I got a lot of concerning phone calls and emails from people. So there were planned outages of about 50,000 customers, but over 100,000 customers in my area had outages, which means another 50,000+ had unplanned outages, and people felt that they should have gotten notified for an unplanned outage. It's like, well, if your power went out unplanned, then you're not going to get a notification. It was not planned. So I think just there's this, at least in my area, idea that someone's going to tell you exactly what to do every step of the way in some kind of an emergency situation, and the community needs to be more prepared to be resilient and respond for themselves and help their neighbors who can't respond for themselves. If you have somebody with that needs additional assistance, that's your neighbor, you need to help them. So that's all in the public information area. That all keeps me up at night. Just the idea that someone would stay in their burning home because they didn't get an evacuation notice, like that keeps me up at night. The insurance was already mentioned, but I just want to add an issue that I see in this space. This is a premier issue in my opinion. And part of a concern I have that's a growing concern is even areas with significant mitigation are not seeing the ability to get and retain insurance. And so there is a disconnect between codes and mitigation and actual insurance. And so somehow maybe there's some legislation opportunity there that if there is XYZ applied, that you must offer insurance. I don't know what to do with it, but if we go to all these links in our community and spend all this public money to mitigate and to do all the things to make the risk go down, then our community members should be able to have insurance. And I guess in that statement is sort of my last piece, is just the figuring out the correct balance of what is the compelling governmental interest in this space, like what are the public benefits versus the private requirements. Like people move to Colorado and like freedom and like independence and those things. And so they want to be able to have their home and make decisions for themselves. And at what point does it cross over into like a common issue and a common community risk that there is governmental interest in? So I think figuring that out in this space is really complicated, because if your whole neighborhood can't get insurance because of your one property, like that, there is a public interest in that, even if you want to have huge trees that you love very much. So it's a complicated point, and I'm not sure how to strike the right balance. And I think that's something that warrants more discussion.
Commissioner Neese.
Okay, thanks. I've got lots, but I'm gonna focus on what we can do at the state and try to nudge at the federal level, because there's a lot you can do on the local level. And so we'll start with sharing some of the stuff that's been successful at the local level. We obviously have our new build and major remodel wildfire codes. Those have been successful. We've done one round of modification to those just to simplify them, because we just had feedback from how that was working out. We had a score sheet before where you could kind of mix and match, and that was confusing people. So we simplified that to just a do this period. We have also been cheerleaders for Forest Service projects in our area, notably the Baldy project. The Forest Service, we thank them so much for their work, but their communications aren't really that great, and a lot of times miss the mark. And so we've been staying in touch with the Forest Service and using our PIO and our communications tools to help cheerlead for that big Forest Service program that includes all the types of mitigation, mastication, hand thinning, and prescribed fire, which we had one prescribed fire this spring on that project already. Because of our cheerleading for the Forest Service, that has helped us improve our relationships with them, and that has helped us actually get some funding for a project that's being planned by the city and county directly around the lands of this, directly around the city of Ouray. And so we're working on a pretty ambitious mitigation project right around the city of Ouray with help from the Forest Service because of those relationships we've built by helping cheerlead their projects. So those have been some successful strategies. Another successful strategy we've had, and something that I think should be replicated around the state, sounds like La Plata has some of this, is a local nonprofit. Here it's West Region Wildfire County, or West Region Wildfire Council, and they cover about 6 counties, including Ouray County, and they do a ton of outreach, and they perform a really useful function serving as a pass-through for federal funds. As a lot of you probably know, it's hard to contract with the federal government. And so if you're a small company, a couple people with chainsaws and a chipper, you're probably not going to go after federal contracts because you got to sign up for the SAM system and get a DUNS number and yada, yada, yada. And so what West Region does is they get federal grants, and then they just hire those local contractors to do projects and do cost shares with individual homeowners, and they send out mail to people's houses. They go knock door to door. They have funds for free wildfire assessments, so you can call them up, schedule a free assessment. They come to your house, tell you what you need to do, like what your danger areas are, and then they give you a list of local contractors, and they'll hold people's hand through the process of using those contractors and getting reimbursements. They have been really, really invaluable. And I think it would be a smart use of funds for the state and the feds to support those types of operations with really just operational funding. All nonprofits have that struggle. People want to fund specific projects, but they have a hard time paying staff, paying rent, that kind of thing. So I think just operational support to nonprofits doing this work will get a really good bang for your buck there. The other one I heard mentioned was enforcement on Forest Service lands. Gonna restate that. We've got one law enforcement officer, federal law enforcement officer for the entire GMUG forest. That person can't be super effective. However, we do have alpine rangers, which are seasonal folks who don't have law enforcement abilities, but are kind of the old school Forest Service rangers that go out and just talk to people, shake their hands. They're not out there. I think they might be able to write tickets, but I don't think they really ever do. And they've been very, very effective doing education and soft power enforcement. And I think that's a place, again, where there'd be a really good bang for our buck. The county supplements that program in partnership with the Forest Service. So that's another hard recommendation, is to support that Alpine Ranger program. Maybe the state could kick in on that. Let's see, pass-throughs. Locally, we use the West Region Wildfire Council as a pass-through, but another one is the National Forest Foundation. I think that federal contracting is a huge bottleneck, and so we have to look through for those pass-through organizations. And finally, homeowners insurance. Again, we already talked about this. People get no credit for doing resiliency work on their homes or in their neighborhoods. West Region Wildfire Council is trying to engage insurance companies on that, as I know the state has, but I think that's another important topic. And I think that's a place where we could do a deep dive to try and figure out some way to force insurance companies to react to proactive, responsible mitigation. So to summarize, I want to say support those pass-through nonprofit organizations like the National Forest Foundation, West Region Wildfire Council, and others. Support the Alpine Ranger program. That's very effective. And then engaging insurance companies on homeowners insurance. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
I'd mainly like to reinforce what some of the things Jake was just saying. We developed a very similar program to their Alpine Ranger program, and especially like yesterday, right? Sunday afternoon on a holiday weekend when everyone's leaving to go back home, these guys are out there driving around, pouring water on campfires that are just left burning in the national forest in high winds. I mean, it's crazy, but a lot more of what they do is just that kind of soft touch that Jake was talking about, just connecting with people. We do find that people who know that there's an enforcement presence paying attention behave a lot better in the public lands. And we've really been able, with a relatively small county contribution, been able to really build out the ranks of the boots on the ground. And I don't know if you are all getting this, but what we're getting from our district rangers in the Forest Service is they're in a hiring freeze. They're looking at budget cuts. It's insane. We just had a pretty scary fire up in Lake County, right on our northern border. And, the amount of money they spent on air support there was unbelievable. I mean, they really were committed to knocking it down, but had we been able to spend that money on mitigation and wildfire, preventing wildfire in the first place, would have been a better spending of funds. Also, I want to support what he was saying about working with these pass-through organizations. We work with National Forest Foundation too. They manage a lot of our contracting here, both on, mainly on public lands, but they've been helpful too in private land situations as well. And then I wanted to ask you, Jake, the West Regional Wildfire Council that you're working with on private lands, what you described them doing is awesome. But in our experience, like that's the charge of the Colorado State Forest, working with private landowners. And we found them I would have inserted their name for what you were describing, what we get here, but I'm just curious, are they not particularly effective or available in your part of the state?
Colorado State Forest Service is present, but they seem like they don't have deployable resources. So they attend planning meetings, they're supportive, they help us try and find funding, but they don't have like the operational capacity to do that mitigation work. I think in our area, they're really, we've got a couple people who show up for forest health stuff and planning stuff, but other than that, we see them in a firefighting response capacity.
Okay, well, that's interesting, and this might be something, I think it is something for, if maybe not legislation, I don't know, but more of a, I mean, we have a great state forester now, Matt McCombs. He's very responsive and just a really nimble mind and voice. And I feel like, you know, there may be some standardization that we could work on with the state forest, because we, in our experience here, and we've made some investments in it, honestly, through grants and stuff to try to get more support here, but they're doing a lot of the wildfire mitigation plans for private landowners, just property by property by property. And then they're also working with our fire protection districts in many instances to show up and help with the work through these identified priority neighborhoods, chipping and hauling and that kind of thing. So they sound like maybe they're a lot more engaged on the ground and maybe better funded and supported in our case. But I think that's a really big resource that's been, I hate to say backburnered, but they kind of have been a bit, you know, they had that one fire up in, I think it was Jeffco, where they ended up losing the ability to actually use prescribed fire within their agency. And I don't know, I think there's a real, it's time to bring them back online and showcase them a little more. And so maybe that would be something for a future conference, Katie, would be get Matt McCombs and really talk to us about what the state forest mission is, what their capacities are, what they'd like to see. And maybe we can support them more on that.
Can I insert real quick here? I'm hoping to have Director McCombs come to CCAP and present in August. And I'm hoping that will be a short one, but we would welcome to come to CCI as well. I think this is a really important conversation. Sorry to jump in order here, but I just wanted to insert that at this time. Thanks.
Go ahead, Commissioner Porter Norton.
Sorry, I had unstable internet for some strange reason, so I jumped back on. I hope I'm not repeating a couple things. Really great discussion here. One of the things we've done, and there's no silver bullet in any of this, but we started a program that some of you might know about called the Wildfire and Watershed Protection Fund. And it has the word fund in it for a reason. So I just was looking at our budget, and we put 67,000 in each year, and the city of Durango put 63. What that pays for is a coordinator, and we hope in the future a grant writer. And it's been, if you think about like Ashley, what you were saying about the government nexus, it's so there. If you just look at the wildfires we've had, have been like an all county response for weeks. And not to mention lost assets, our road and bridge department getting flooded out from burn scars. So the nexus is there. I'm not sure that citizens always get that nexus, but my point is we put this modest investment in, and what we get is a coordinator, and she has been able to bird dog the co-swap grants and to get, she's kind of a magic maker, but she's gotten all these federal, state, and local entities to coordinate and create one mitigation map. And then we have something very similar to what Jake was calling called the Wildfire Adapted Partnership. And then with co-swap money, we're focusing on one watershed, which is the city's water source, and really just like hitting that watershed with everything that is possible, including knocking on doors, mitigation grants, free assessments, baseline water quality monitoring. It kind of goes on. And I hope as our budget gets tighter with all kind of mandates coming down that we can continue this pretty modest funding, because we get a staff member dedicated to it, is my long-winded way of saying. But yeah, anytime the state could fund operating, that just helps us. And if I can figure out how to work my phone here, I'll put a link in the chat.
All right, and I just want to fold in one more comment about insurance. In talking to my insurance provider, where my homeowner's insurance this year doubled. And believe me, it was a shock. And she said, quote, "You are lucky you're gonna get it at all. So just pay or take your chances." And our house is built of cement siding and a metal roof, and we are completely mitigated around our home. And she said that does not play any part. It's the region that they look at. They don't look at, and we were inspected when we built our house and they had it noted. So some kind of more logic behind those decisions on insurance carriers would be so beneficial, because people are having heartburn and are now completely unprotected. So I just thought if there was any effort, there's a pretty broad list of things that insurance providers need to do and look at a little more case by case basis. Thanks.
All right, I hear silence, so I'll go ahead. A couple things that can be done: engage the collaboratives in our region in southern, southwestern Colorado. We have, I think it's 4 collaboratives, and they work very closely with any CFLRP project that is going in your region. So that's an opportunity. I want to put a plug in for capacity building. Nonprofits involvement in fire mitigation is really a tremendous benefit to the communities they're in. They have rent chipper rebate programs. Some of the collaboratives or some of the homeowners rent out their chippers to other homeowner associations. And if there's a way to encourage that collaboration, capacity building, and funding of capacity building, it's such a huge emotional boost to a community when, if they're cohesive enough and have enough volunteers, a couple of chainsaws and chaps and a couple of helmets to start up a volunteer fire mitigation team. That is leveraging resources. And one thing we do need to do is, well, I just pointed out, is Colorado State Forest Service also processes and does the inspection for a lot of federal forest mitigation funds and grants. And because of that, that process gets bogged down sometimes locally, depending on the Colorado State Forest Service capacity, receiving grants. And then once you get a grant, the organization that receives it has their reimbursement grants. So you have to have the cash to get to the next reimbursement. And sometimes organizations don't go in for a grant just because they don't have the match or the reimbursement times are too long coming back through the Colorado State Forest Service. So those are just a couple things that would help streamline and expand capacity from a policy standpoint.
Okay, I'll go next. We just presented to, I sit on the Colorado Forest Health Council, as you all know, and chair legislative committee, and I also sit on a subcommittee with the Colorado Fire Commission with Commissioner Dahlkemper, and there's a lot of the conversations we're having. We just presented to the Wildfire Matters Review Committee last week our recommendations for 2025, and we're already working on 2026. And we only get so many recommendations. So there's some things here that you all have presented that we're not having conversations on. Commissioner Church and I serve on that council. We also have some Indigenous membership with the Mountain Ute Tribe, the vice chairman of that, and others. And so it sounds like first I need to get you guys the report and so the recommendations, but it sounds like some of these ideas and concerns are something I should bring forward to the Forest Health Council. And so I'd love it if we could get a list of all these things from all the from this committee. And also I think it'd be really important, whether CCR or CCCAT, that we just take a little bit of time and sit down and really kind of pull this all together. I call us kind of the wildfire commissioners to the state agencies, and really how we're all trying to communicate. There's just so much to do. And I just wanted to share that. I agree with everything everyone has said. My homeowner's insurance, because I live unincorporated Limerick County, went up $2,000 this year, so almost more than doubled. And so it's something we're all living together. It's really a lot of work. And also there's biomass study that we got a grant for DOLA to look at biomass, how we get this work off the landscapes. As I understand it, my staff is communicating and working with Boulder County staff, because Boulder County has also employed an outside consultant who's doing similar work and research. And Commissioner Stoltzman, you and I have to talk about this, but I guess our two staffs are communicating, because we're kind of doing similar work in different groups, but we're trying to make sure that we're not replicating, and maybe we share data. And so that, I think, will be great information for all of us to share together with across the state. And I know we're doing a lot of work in this space, but there's a lot of work to do. And I wanted to also share that the Forest Health Tracker that we're working through the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute, that's doing some work through the Forest Health Council. There's a forest tracker talking and looking at completed projects and who did it and how much. And I got a preview of that today. And as soon as it goes public at our meeting on July 24th, I'm sure that we can all share that. I think it's interesting. We're doing something similar, the similar GIS tool here in Larimer. I think that we really need to kind of figure out how we all communicate and share and have a collective voice, because as you know, one of those bills to bring some money to 3 pilot programs to kind of work from the ground up on mitigation work, suggesting some of the ideas that Commissioner Church did got killed in the last day or two in the state legislature. It was a bill that we all supported, saying it wasn't a priority. It was $150,000, and I think some of these, these other counties could apply for that grant for $50,000 to kind of support some of this work that we're all talking about was really needed. And it would also, I felt, fuel some innovative ideas that we could find and support for the rest of the state. And we're working on lots of things at the Forest Health Council, but we only get 5 priority bills to suggest. And so there are 2 of them are internships and workforce capacity, and how do we get this kind of pipeline going forward? And because we need more boots on the ground, and there's just a lot to talk about here. And I think we need more time to kind of wrangle all these big items, and would love to have this list so I could bring it forward and present to the Forest Health Council for our next legislative ideas session. And also, you're all welcome to come join us publicly on July 24th. We're up in Glenwood. And Commissioner Hollingsworth, I saw your signs. I was up in your county in Boulder County on 4th of July. We went and ran around your forest for a little bit. I was looking at some mining claims up there, but just want to say you both have beautiful counties. Thank you.
Oh, you're on mute, Commissioner Hollingsworth.
I said my signs are all down now because we're in between. Anyway, thank you. Besides my long list I gave earlier, I wanted to say that it's really interesting listening to everyone, because it sounds like many communities have something going on. And so that's exciting right there. It'd be really nice if some of it could be statewide coordinated, but then still give local jurisdictions the funding and the resources to do these collaborations. I thought of 2 more things. One, I put in the chat. Another challenge is the absentee landowners. They own this beautiful property in the mountains, but they're not mitigating. And so the neighbors are, and I know I get asked that quite a bit, what can we do? But we don't have any kind of code enforcement, zoning that requires landowners to do mitigation. So that could be a potential bill statewide. And then when you were talking about biomass removal, where can it go? We used to be able to take the slash, because we have a slash pile, probably most of you do, take the slash and like the landfills didn't want that. So then they're like, we'll take chips. So we do chipping. And now we're hearing the last year and this year that companies that wanted chips don't want chips anymore, because there's so many. They can get them just around the corner. And so now we're paying thousands and thousands of dollars to haul them down to the landfill. And it's just kind of an odd situation to be in. Like, everyone's trying to do the right thing, but the system isn't really quite fit together correctly.
Great conversation, everybody. I just wanted to add on the insurance piece, some additional information in talking with different insurance carriers and representatives that represent lobbying firms for insurance carriers. Part of the increase that community members in Colorado are seeing is because we're a dual risk state. So it's that we have a high hail risk and a high fire risk. And in fact, the hail cost is much higher, although we've all suffered from fatalities and all of these awful things from fire. So that sticks in our head as very risky and very scary. The hail cost to insurance companies has made it less profitable in Colorado. And so that is driving up the cost. At least this is what the insurance companies and representatives have said to us, is that the hail is driving up the cost as much, if not more, than the fires. So I do think in talking about some of the mitigation pieces around, the class 4, I think it is, impact resistant shingles and things like that. I think combining things that address not only fire risk, but also lessen the cost to insurers around hail would be good things to talk about. And it would be really nice to get insurance companies to commit, like if XYZ is done, then we can commit to respond in such and such way. But it's so amorphous that you take all these actions and you do all this mitigation, and then we just don't see the response from insurance carriers, at least in our area. So it would be nice to have a better understanding of what they need to see to be profitable, so that we make sure we're investing in the right areas.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Porter Norton.
Yeah, ditto that. I had another idea. What about inviting the insurance commissioner to CCI at the conference? In addition to the Colorado State Forest Service, a number of us, and I apologize, we all go to so many meetings, did talk to, I think it was through CCAT, some commissioners through CCAT did talk to the insurance commissioner. I know Commissioner Shattuck McNally was on there, Commissioner Dahlkemper. So I certainly would never purport to speak for him, but what he said in the meeting was exactly what has been talked about, that the state has not a lot of power over insurance companies and what they can charge. And anybody that was on the call, please tell me. And that it's all them using, I call them actuary people. So what you might have is a community that has really strong mitigation policies. And then let's all not forget, we are getting a statewide WUI code next year. There is a giant disconnect between that on the ground that's happening and what is happening with how they set the rates. They may look at a map that is not a uniform map. A lot of time, the people that are doing these rates don't even live in Colorado. They're using a computer screen from another state. And so he was saying that he very much wants to narrow down, and I don't know if I want to use the word regulate or set new rules on how those rates are set. And so that mitigation would indeed be encouraged. And so but we had a really good call with him. I thought he was very honest, and he, we have the FAIR, I think, is that right? The FAIR board that has been set up. Apparently the maximum policy is 750,000, which we know doesn't go very far in communities like ours with these mountain communities, but it would be something. So I'm looking forward to those packages that will come out in, I think, early next year. And anybody correct me if I don't have some of this right, but I sure would like to raise the insurance issue through CCI and CCAT to the insurance commissioner, so that we let them know that this is a crisis in our communities. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is, we have a composting company that has started to compost forest debris. So that's obviously a private endeavor, but they have received state grants to get going. So that's kind of exciting.
I think I'm next here. I just wanted to add a little more onto Commissioner Hollingsworth's comments about chipping, just sharing thoughts and things we've encountered. this would be in 2018 dollars, because that's when we did it, and I know things have changed since then, but we did a study on what it would cost us to invest in what's called a tub grinder. It's a big machine, chews up trees, stumps, appliances, tires on rims. I mean, like, it just eats stuff, but it creates really pretty nice mulch. And we spent $850,000 on this machine for our landfill, although you can move them around. But we did a study with our landfill engineer, and he determined that we were going to save about $2.5 million on airspace. It's sort of extending the life of our landfill by keeping all that material out of the actual piles. And then CDPHE authorized us to use the chips as alternative daily cover for the landfill as well. So when that stuff did go in, it was, to kind of tamp everything down, make sure stuff's not blowing away, required processes that we have to do at the end of each day at the landfill. And then what we found is, people actually will pay to bring that stuff into the landfill, drop it, we chew it up into mulch. Other people, once they bring in their refuse, will drive over there and pay $20 pickup load to have the landfill guys scoop it up and dump it back in their pickup truck and take it home with them. So it's been kind of a little bit of an entrepreneurial element in our landfill enterprise that has helped address the wildfire mitigation challenge.
Hey, everybody, I guess I'll go next. This is Dave Whistle in Park County. I wanted to address the whole insurance issue because with my appraisal and assessor background, basically, we had a presentation made to us last year that the old methods of determining fire ratings and insurance basis rates are out the window. So what we've got are market forces involved here, and it's going to be XYZ company, whoever it is, and let's just say they've got major insurance holdings in California, and with the catastrophic events there, they're making market-based decisions to leave certain areas. And if they're a major carrier, for example, we use Safeco for our home and autos here in Fairplay, but that doesn't mean they'll be around forever. So the old way used to be your ISO rating and what was your fire department and all that good stuff. Not even in the picture any longer. Doesn't matter what you've done, like Amy had mentioned, I've been to her house. It's as fireproof as you're going to see anywhere in the mountains, WUI, red zone, whatever you want to call it. And I've been around through wildland fires since Buffalo Creek #1 in the mid-90s. So we've dealt with a lot of it in our mountain communities. We know that. But this whole exit of insurance companies is really beyond a lot of the factors that we've talked about. I wasn't on this all the time. Second thing I wanted to mention is we have a watershed protection association in the Upper South Platte Basin. And I don't know whether our friends in Jeffco, Douglas, Teller, Park are the Upper South Platte Basin. It's called the Coalition for the Upper South Platte. And as a nonprofit watershed protection association, we helped create that way back, I think in the late 80s or early 90s. And it does some fantastic mitigation work in all of the counties in the Upper South Platte Basin, along with all the utility companies, whether it's Denver Water, Colorado Springs Utilities, Aurora, all those guys have this infrastructure in place. And when we have wildland fires, as we've had, just use Hayman, for example, the degradation of the water supply system to all those beautiful people down in the Front Range is significant. And so it's in all of our best interests as we share the watershed. And that's what CUSP really began as, is to bring everybody together, whether they're private, public, federal, state, local, whatever, homeowners associations. And CUSP has been doing a lot of training on volunteers. For example, they use the Colorado Springs or El Paso County Bar Association and the Waldo Canyon fire. 12 years in a row now, they put attorneys out there with pickaxes and planting trees. And so far, they haven't hurt themselves. So that's a real success story. And just an example, they help people build trails and maintain trails and all those kinds of things that people in the forest like to enjoy. So I wanted to add that comment. Yes, I think adding the insurance commissioner would be a great idea at a conference or even a working group, because to get the actual people on the ground who could explain it better than me, would be really helpful, because I think it would give us the understanding that we don't have right now. Because why is Amy's gone up $10,000-$20,000? Someone else doubled from 2 to 4, and yet mine is still somewhere around 2,500. So those are some of the conundrums. So thanks for the time.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in. One thing we've seen in the southwest part of the state is we've been giving logs away or trees away to Wood for Life out of Shiprock, Arizona. And that's a great opportunity. They come up and get the wood. The second thing I've seen done, some people are giving the logs to Timber Tech to make into panelized structural panels. And this is an opportunity to help us, a startup business in your region. Third thing I wanted to mention is work through your Region 9 economic development. And ours is Region 9, but your economic development region. I know we financed a huge chipper that'll take, I guess, 22-inch trees, the whole tree, and chip it pretty darn fast. And that was a going business that had a good ROI and a good cash flow and projections and asset base. Last thing is a question. I mean, what will it take to force Colorado into an insurance pool that we set up within the state? When we can't get, I mean, our insurance rates are going to go up, but if we split off houses in the WUI or fire insurance separate from, the private insurers, does that bias? It's still going to go up, but at least we'll have insurance. So a question for the future that we can't answer right now would take a couple of years of study, I think.
I'll just hop in with just two very quick comments because I see we're losing folks too. One, I wanted to just circle back to the panel we had talked about, or some configuration of a panel. Another thought is Carol Walker, who represents the umbrella group of insurance companies as well. But as we think about some different ways of tackling this issue, might be really interesting to hear her perspective and really continue to build that relationship there, as we work on these issues. The other piece I just wanted to mention briefly, and I don't think there's state policy around this, but I do think it's something for us to consider as we communicate about these issues to state policymakers and our Colorado congressional delegation. And that's, how do we, in a very impactful, concise, powerful way, talk about the impact our efforts are making to help reinforce the importance of some of the strategies we're talking about and why we need to look at them. And Greg, I have to give you a shout out at Chaffee County. Your brief PowerPoint that you shared at Congresswoman Pedersen's Wildfire Forum is an excellent example of that. And there is a data point that you use. My memory is awful, so I'm probably going to mess it up and ruin my point here. But I think you said you made something like a targeted 15% effort regarding mitigation for more than a 50% return on investment or reduction of wildfire risk.
So if you do the prioritized treatment working through GIS layers like we did with Colorado Forest Restoration Institute, they told us if we identified and collaboratively treated the right 5% of our forest, of our lands, we could see a 50% reduction in the risk of catastrophic wildfire. So not that you won't have fires, but if you do this right, they think you can knock down the risk of, really, really bad situations by half.
Thank you for sharing that, because that alone is a really powerful, concise statistic that makes a strong case for why we want to continue to invest in mitigation and the difference that it can make. So I think there's something around strategic communications as we think about these policy components and how we really hit home these points. I'm not exactly sure what the answer is, but I see, Greg, even when you were talking a little bit earlier, I think it was about air quality, some of those ways we could get at it from our different experiences.
Hi, it's me again. The more we talk, the more I think. So as far as the chips going in and out, Greg, we do that. What has happened though is that people aren't interested in them, even our local residents, enough to draw it down. So that's why we have our mount chip going on, which is a fire danger in and of itself. But I would love to, in a future meeting, talk about other methods people maybe are finding successful. Because we looked into an air curtain burner, sounded great until we realized it takes labor to keep feeding it and you have to rake it. And it's open, it's not closed. And then we had someone come and talk to us about biochar, like a big pit, and you put the wood in there and it creates biochar, which is really great for the earth. But it's, again, open fire. So I would love to hear that. Another thing that we have happen at our site are people bring hot logs in from Beetle Kill. And so are we helping or hurting the spread, you know, when they're coming in? And sometimes people will actually take the hot logs from the hot log section because they want the wood, not realizing that they're not doing themselves or others favors. So a lot of other things to talk about in these meetings. Thanks.
I'd like to just follow up on Leslie's comment to me there. And that when I really think about it from my vantage, you know, and our experience here, when I really think about what we've been working on, the most important thing is this idea of a prioritized treatment map across jurisdictional boundaries. And so, you know, I think it's going to be different in every community, how you work this, but I feel like if there could be funding made available, and maybe it's through the state forest, to help convene this sort of what we've called a next generation community wildfire protection plan for counties or other regions. And you bring in all of the relevant agencies, quit doing what Dan Gibbs has called random acts of restoration, and really work from build a, you know, we had about a, I don't know, 60 layer GIS map that showed all the assets at risk, showed the sort of flammability factor and the treatability factor, because you can't treat some areas too steep, too remote, and then build out a treatment priority map that gets at this. What is that 5% that we need to treat to have a tremendous impact on our future? And then getting all the agencies to buy in. There's already legislation and policy in place that directs both the Forest Service and the BLM to participate in these kinds of efforts. They can't necessarily initiate them, but if they are initiated locally, they have to participate. And I think there's enough. I mean, I've heard there's been a number of things we've talked about today across the state where we just have different names for it, but it's basically the same thing. I mean, Jake talked about a lot of things that we're doing, so has Marcia and Clyde. And so I think, you know, that really might be something that, you know, potentially for an investment of, I don't know, maybe 100,000 per county, you could convene this conversation, build out CFRI to help with the GIS mapping and this prioritization. And we could at least develop plans and buy-in. And then, you know, the funding takes longer, but getting that, when you're talking about federal agencies, getting that NEPA pipeline flowing, that's been a real challenge. Once you have the treatment priority map, then they can start doing the NEPA analysis, right? So I don't know, out of the 30,000 acres we want to treat, we've treated, I forget the numbers, let's say 12,000 or something, but we have like 16,000 now in that NEPA pipeline, which, you know, probably, let's say it takes 3 years, start to finish. And so this concept of pulling everybody together and building out a common prioritized bought into game plan that's been the real game changer for us more than anything else.
Commissioner Porter Norton.
Yeah, Greg, ditto on that. And I have a success story. It seems like with wildfire, we need to hear what's working. So I told you earlier, and full credit to our staff for figuring this out, but in 2022, we started something in the fall called a meta meeting. And that name is, you know, like meta fish populations. So it's like everybody within a certain genre, you come to the meta meeting, and we have like 45 people coming. And it's Colorado State Forest Service, U.S. Forest Service, BLM, all the fire entities, the county, the city. I mean, the list goes on and on. Feed lunch to people. And and then the nonprofit groups, we have a plethora of nonprofits here doing various stuff. Anyway, they created the meta map, and it does exactly what you're talking. If you look at it, it needs really refined because it looks like a plate of spaghetti if you turn on all the layers. But if you're working, let's say in Perrin's Peak, which is kind of this dry peak you can see right outside of a desert type peak right outside Durango, you can turn on the meta map and see what treatments are planned by who around it. What this did, here's the really cool success story, is we, through CoSwap, got money to work on the private side in a very at-risk subdivision. And it prompted the Forest Service to do a categorical exclusion for their side of the fence. So now we're getting thousands of acres on both sides of the fence treated. And that, we already had a fire in 2002 almost come through that area. And so it's exactly what you're talking about. The success there, I would say, was staff capacity. Well, first of all, the success was vision, because our emergency manager and our WWPF coordinator, super brilliant people, have gone to school for wildfire kind of thing. And so they got this vision, and they're kind of just these sort of electric personalities that got everybody on board with them. And it's the logical thing to do, but it takes that work at the community level. And it takes that relationship building. We're having the meta meetings quarterly, and now we're doing it a couple of times a year. So, and in our region, Clyde said it, we have almost more collaboratives than can be handled. We've got a nonprofit, we've got the county doing this. And so it's this idea of coordinating, but that's why I think back to Jake's point about money for capacity building is so important, because if this would have just been handed, for sure not to a commissioner, but just handed to any of our regular staff that already were doing other jobs, it never would have happened, because it takes all those phone calls and following up. And we had a district ranger with our Forest Service who got it. He realized, like, oh, wow, all this work is happening on the Florida River side of it, on the private side, I better do the public. So it's just great to do all this learning. Really appreciate what everybody's doing.
To follow on that too, Marcia, I think often when I'm talking, doing these presentations like the one Leslie mentioned, I don't emphasize sort of the role of champions and local leadership too much, because that's something that each community has to figure out for themselves. There's not really a recipe that you can hand them. And it can be discouraging, I suppose, in that regard. But I don't think there's any way to do this without that. So, in our case, I was part of it. And then you may know of Cindy Williams. She and I did this Envision Chaffee County thing together. She's just a local retiree activist. She's amazing. But, there was good chemistry there and energy, and we were able to create that spark. But I think that is something to think about. If you're working on this kind of thing, is like, well, maybe it is a commissioner and maybe it isn't, but who do we have that we could kind of empower and energize, because it does take some of that to get it rolling. Once communities, I forget who mentioned that, but one of them, it might have been Clyde's, that you start to get this energy going in a community, neighborhood have success, and it builds this sort of community spirit. The thing takes on a life of its own, but getting to those starting blocks really does take a champion or two. And you can't avoid that, but there's a lot of different ways to do it. It all depends on kind of who you got on hand, I think.
Let me just comment here. One thing that we learned in our area here in the Animas Valley, 2002 was the Missionary Ridge Fire, 80-some thousand acres. Then there was the Valley Fire right across 3 miles away on the other side of the Animas River Valley. 300 acres. When that was over, there was a real teachable moment. The community was listening. They were ready to understand, absorb, and do something about it and take action. And I think we need to take advantage of those learning moments when they're created. Don't go create them, please. But when they occur, take advantage. And that's the time for big press releases and a lot of discussion and programs start. And if we as a counties, if we have as regions, have some people that are there that can communicate and move people to action and coordinate, it can be pretty successful.
I know we're a dwindling group, but any last, and this has been a really great discussion, so thank you, anyone. Any last kind of comments? Otherwise, I might Commissioner Whistle.
Hey, Katie, this is kind of for you. The lady that was involved with CUSP, the Coalition for the Upper South Platte, is by the name of Carol Acarius. And if you, Greg knows her. She started a group, and I haven't seen Carol in a couple of years, but she lives in Lake George area. Actually, she lives in Teller County now, but she started a group called COCO, and COCO. Amy may know more than I do, but anyhow, she became, well, CUSP really became kind of the lead agency for mitigation on post large wildland fires because of the Hayman experience. They expanded that with Waldo Canyon because it was so close to them, and then certainly our friends down in La Plata County and Costillo and Conejos County, and they really got involved in that. And I know they've got a good organization that was trying to bring some cohesiveness to all these individual efforts. Like, we know what's going on in our backyard. We don't know what's going on in your backyard. But to get that management side of it and to organize these volunteer groups, I think would be to all of our advantage. Just if nothing else, have a directory of them, where they're operating and some of the things I've heard, and looking at other people's experiences. But I wanted to just put that plug in for her.
Well, and I'll just follow up really quick. I know we're way past time. We went from COCO to Central Colorado Forest Collaboration, and it is Pike National Forest, all three ranger districts of the Pike, and we've got Forest Service, state, I'm the only commissioner and actually the only one from Park County participating at the moment. But we are building that coalition, and we are actually mapping a whole region that we set up, including the Pike National Forest, to get mitigation projects mapped and where we need to go and get our critical areas that we can, Greg, do 5% to get 50% benefit. And then my ultimate goal is to bring monies in for individual homeowners or neighborhoods. We're also spread out. A lot of us don't live in a formal neighborhood at all. So we all can build off of it. I've learned a lot from you guys, and I'm going to take it to our next CCFC meeting. So thank you very much.
So happy to hear that. So I just thought I would briefly touch on some of the kind of the themes and kind of next steps for conversations, but if I'm missing anything, please feel free to jump in. Public communication, really, it sounds like on all things related to fire, but especially those time-sensitive notifications. Of course, insurance, a meeting with Commissioner Conway and Carol Walker on kind of what the lay of the landscape in Colorado is. It sounds like maybe just a one-off deep dive with the State Forest Service on what resources they have available and where further partnerships might be able to be leveraged. And then lastly, approaches to dealing with wildfire mitigation debris. Sounds like lots of different things that can potentially be done with that, but what is kind of the next iteration, if you will? Anything I am missing? I know you guys covered a lot of ground, but I think those were some of the themes I picked up on from all of you. Okay,
maybe,
good.
I'm not sure, Katie, if you caught that one, but maybe sort of funding or facilitation support for local government engaging in the CWPP process. And specifically with prioritized cross-jurisdictional treatment maps.
Okay.
That could be a relatively small investment statewide, and we don't even need to talk statewide necessarily, but throughout the mountain, the forested regions, the WUI, where we could, really help maybe some counties that are still struggling to get that thing rolling. A lot of the folks on this call are doing it one way or another, but that could be something where it's just almost teeing it up for that champion and then take the community with them, but you need a little help sometimes getting off the dime.
Yeah.
Great. This has been
That's
great.
great.
And I really think we need to carry it to the whenever it is, the winter conference, November.
Yeah, I would love to be able to set up hopefully some additional kind of one-off virtual conversations like this. And yeah, kind of see where we might be able to take it from there. More conversations at winter conference. Maybe it's white papers or letters or things like that of kind of our recommendations or our desires moving forward. But
Katie, do you also see a quick opportunity just to touch base with Senator Cutter to answer that question? I think that really good question about what might we see coming out of the Wildfire Matters Review Committee, if we know at this point, and then also coupling that with the themes that you just shared from our session. I know we've had an opportunity to talk with her in some different ways, but just as a opportunity.
yeah, definitely.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for coordinating this too.
you are so
Thank you.
welcome. Happy to. Well, that is kind of all I've got, unless anybody has any last thoughts, but thank you all for spending so much time on this today, and looking forward to more discussion with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.